Hello, I'm Eric Korman, CEO at League of Education Voters, and the parent of a high school junior of the global majority in the public school system who is accessing special education services. I advocate because of my son, so that every student can get what they need, when they need it, and how they need it. This webinar features closed captions. To access captioning, just click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. Spanish interpretation is also available. To access this webinar in Spanish, in your webinar controls at the bottom of your screen, click Interpretation, which is the icon that looks like a globe, and then click Spanish. And if you want to hear only Spanish without the original English in the background, click Mute Original Audio. Special thanks to Claudia Azar, who is our interpreter. If you have any technical issues, feel free to use the chat function, which I will monitor throughout the webinar. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to create learning environments where every Washington student feels safe, supported, and a positive sense of belonging so that they can achieve academically and access the life they choose. Our website is educationvoters.org. We believe that education is a tool for justice. One of the systems that perpetuate racial and disability injustice experienced by global majority communities is our schools. We believe every child deserves an excellent public education that provides equitable opportunities for success. In order to achieve this, we must pursue radical change in our school systems for equity, justice, and liberation. We must build schools and systems that honor the humanity of every student. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 12 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's webinar is From Promise to Progress, Revisiting Educational Opportunity Gaps in Washington State. In 2008, landmark studies conducted by the Commission on African American Affairs, the Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs, and the Commission on Hispanic Affairs laid the foundation for the creation of the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction's Educational Opportunity Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee, also known as the EOGOAC. Since then, the EOGOAC has played a pivotal role in addressing systemic inequities in Washington's education system. Now, nearly 2 decades later, the Washington State Legislature tasked these same commissions with conducting a follow-up study to assess progress and identify persistent and emerging gaps. This webinar will provide historical context, share the intent and scope of the current study, and outline what's ahead after the commissions released their findings this past June. And now I would like to ask our panelists to introduce yourselves. Feel free to popcorn to whoever you'd like to go next. And I'll go ahead and popcorn to Ed. Why don't you go first?
Thank you so much, Eric. My name is Ed Prince. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington State Commission on African American Affairs. As with all the commissions, they're like the front door to state government for our communities. If you're having an issue with an agency, typically you'll end up coming to one of the commissions to help you navigate that. We work in education, economic security, children and family, public safety, and public health. And I will popcorn it to my colleague, Maria.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Maria Sigüenza. I direct the Washington State Commission on Hispanic Affairs. As Ed said, we often see ourselves as a front door, though we are intentionally working to not be a barrier for our community if they don't want to engage with the commission. We always are working to redirect and connect folks to our state system, either our state agencies or connect to the legislature, and we also do a little bit of educational work in terms of what our systems look like and how do we effectively engage with them. And this is probably one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had, having been appointed in 2018 and reappointed recently. I am just thrilled to be here. Thank you, Eric. I will pass it on to my colleague, Nam.
Hello, my name is Nam Nguyen. I am the director of the Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. I started just last year, July last year, and previously I was an attorney. Was there any other prompt? No. Okay.
Nope, it was just if you want to share any more about what brings you to the work, but that what you shared is great.
No, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Great. Well, to begin today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded traditional lands of the 29 federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes in Washington state, including the Chehalis, Chinook, Colville, Cowlitz, Duwamish, Ho, Jamestown Sklallam, Kalispel, Lower Elwha Clallam, Lummi, Makah, Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Nooksack, Port Gamble Sklallam, Puyallup, Quileute, Quinault, Samish, Sauk-Suiattle, Shoalwater Bay, Skokomish, Snoqualmie, Spokane, Squaxin Island, Stillaguamish, Suquamish, Swinomish, Tulalip, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Upper Skagit, and Yakima. We give thanks to elders both past and present, our Native and Indigenous colleagues, and the land itself. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is a space for you to submit questions to us. If time permits, we'll have about 10 minutes for questions after the panel discussion wraps up. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function or at info@educationvoters.org. And speaking of the chat function, you're welcome to use it to check in and comment on anything you hear. Welcome, Maria, Ed, and Nam. Ed, I will go ahead and cede the floor to you, and then after that, we'll have Nam go, and then Maria.
Thank you so much, Eric. Let me share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes,
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. So as we were mentioned, as it was mentioned, the commissions were tasked with doing this by the Education Opportunity Gap Advisory Committee. And this was a labor of love for a good couple of years. And I want to thank all the people who helped us get this study done. First of all, our consultant, Imago Consulting, which did an excellent job working with the various different members of the community. And then we had these are our acknowledgments. These are people who worked in our work group. We had a very expansive work group of people, tried to get people from all over the state. Then we had other individuals that provided input. Of course, our state government partners, our community stakeholders. And so I'm going to move on to get away from that. So our report summary. These are the 8 core themes that we saw as we talked to people and we were working and we were looking at the data. We want to make sure that we hire and support Black educators. So Eric mentioned that he has a child that's a junior in high school. I have 2 children, one in 10th grade, one in 6th grade. And during that time, only my daughter in 4th grade had a teacher that looked like her. And so it's so very important for all kids of color to be able to see people who look like them in the classroom for a variety of different reasons. Everything from emotional support to just understanding what people go through and what the communities look like. Delivering culturally responsive curriculum, just telling the truth and affirming identity and sparking curiosity, as opposed to sidelining the experiences. We found that too often from the people we were talking to, they feel like the Black experience and their perspective had been sidelined. Of course, there's still racism in this country, so confronting the racism in our schools, addressing discipline disparities. So many years ago, we had OSPI put together a task force tasked by the legislature to look at student discipline. And at the time, I believe African Americans were 2 to 3 times more likely to face student discipline than their white peers. We still have a disparity in what we see as far as student discipline, which for too many children take them out of the classroom. BC, before COVID, I was doing a tour of a school, and when I walked in, saw a young man sitting waiting like for the principal. Took a tour of the school. It took me about an hour. As I was getting ready to leave, same young man was still sitting there, hadn't seen the principal yet, but had missed an hour's worth of classwork, probably more because he was probably there before I got there and after I left. And you're not setting your kids up for success when you're doing that. Expanding pathways, more than a one size fits all. Listening to students and families. During this project, we talked to a lot of students and their families to get their opinion on what needs to be seen. Surround them with support. Quick aside, my daughter just started middle school in September, and a couple last week, I think it was, she asked to go back and visit her elementary school. And I was like, oh, it's kind of soon to be going back to your elementary school, but okay. We went back and they gave her so much love and support. She saw most of her old teachers. They told her, you got this, you can do it. And I saw a totally different child as she was walking out of her elementary school um, than I saw when we were walking in. And so it's so important to make sure that we're surrounding our students with support and then tackling systemic change. It's not it's not isolated in programs, it's systems themselves that need to be changed. And so from there, we looked at our 5 interdependent goals for impact. Increased representation and support for Black educators, ensure equitable access to early learning and kindergarten readiness, which is so very important, making sure that kids are ready when they get to kindergarten. And that only happens if we have fully functioning and good early learning programs. And improve student engagement and reduce exclusionary discipline. So every kid deserves to learn. And if you have a child that's disrupting the class, that impacts everyone, but taking that kid out and having them away from the class for an hour, 2 hour, whatever, impacts their education. So finding ways that we can reduce exclusionary discipline, and providing the anti-racist curriculum and fair assessments, and expanding post-secondary pathways and career readiness for Black students. So we ensure every student sees a future, whether it's, college, trade, community college, whatever it is, that we support them to get there. My daughter herself says she wants to go to fashion school. She doesn't want to go to a 4 year. She wants to go do fashion. My son is still trying to figure it out, but he thinks he might want to be a lawyer, which is good because my God, he knows how to argue. Um, so what's working? We talked to so many people and they talked about the things they felt were working. I want to just give a shout out to Teach 253 in Tacoma, Rainier Prep in Seattle, Ace Academy in Seattle. I actually took a tour at Ace Academy at the beginning of this year, and they're doing phenomenal work there. In Seattle Public Schools, Black Studies, Liberatory Ed Work, Centering Joy and Justice in Curriculum. That's just a few examples of what we've gone through and what we've done. Again, this was such a labor of love working on this. What one of the many things that we saw is so many things changed, but so many things still stayed the same, which shows that how much work we still have left to do. I've got 89 pages in this report, and Eric, happy to share it with you so that you can share it with the people who are on this webinar who would like to read it and see more.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll definitely include it in the follow-up materials, and it's also available on our website, educationvoters.org.
Yeah, I am ready to pass it on to Nam.
All right.
Let me stop sharing for him.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. Here it is. So similar to Eric, this is a study that we conducted through the EGOAC. Our commission was the organization that oversaw the study and hired the researcher, which were from the University of Washington School of Education. This is their PowerPoint. This is their slide. I'm kind of cribbing off what the result and the overall finding were. The one thing that's different is that this particular study is a follow-up to a study more than a decade ago However, because a lot of data gathering standard has changed, especially in terms of data disaggregation, that means that we split more. We didn't look at just like a clump of Asian American and clump of Pacific Islander. We started separating them by different country of origin, different ethnicity, different nations. So instead of just looking at two whole like clump of population data, this particular study went through and looked at, for instance, for Asian American, all the ethnicity within the United States, Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipino, and that was about 20 different groups. Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, similarly, instead of looking at them as a uniform whole, they split them up into different island nations. So this study is actually what we consider this study is not really as a follow-up, but actually something rather new, a new look. So because the data just doesn't correlate with the previous work. Okay, let me see if I can go on. Okay, I'm going to skip most of the slides here. There's actually two reports. There's two studies done by two groups overseen by the University of Washington School of Education. One is on the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, and the other one is on Asian and Asian American. Now, the usage of the Asian and Asian American is because a lot of Asian people of Asian ethnic origin in the state who identify themselves as either Asian or Asian American. Asian American usually means that they have a kind of a more of a familial aspect with the American part, and where some people don't consider a lot of Asian living here are don't consider themselves quite American yet, or don't plan to have long-term stay in this country. So introducing our researcher, the lead researcher is Max Halverson of the UW School of Education. Jen Nguyen handles the Asian and Asian American part of the study. Santino Camacho did handle the more of the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander part, and they had a large team conducting the study. They had a somewhat unique framework for the study, grounded on more community-based study, more on social justice, and that a different kind of data gathering technique. They probably would be able to answer more questions if you were interested. We can provide you their contact info. Most of the study was done through interviews and done through getting quantitative and qualitative data through things like the health use surveys, the census, things that are existing, compare them to actual interviews and interview groups. So I'll start with what the finding for Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students were. I'm going to skip most of these. The Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander is actually the largest growing ethnic group in the state. Asian American combined are the largest growing group, but you separated Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, they're faster growing than Asian Americans. And of course, the population is mostly in the larger county of the state. Of course, the three county, Pierce, King, and Snohomish. But there's a lot of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander also on the east side of the mountain, concentrated around the Spokane area. And as you can see, there's a lot of different island nations, 21 overall. And depending how you count, there's actually more than that. And many of them have different identity. Many have disabilities. And I would like to point out, I mean, I'm going to skip some of the slide, but I'd like to point out one of the things that many of the Pacific Islanders have is a unique view on LGBTQ and transgender identity. One of the largest service organization in Washington State for Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander is LGBTQ plus based. They're one of our contractor right now for a contract on Real ID. So again, we're getting in some more of the data part of the work, and how we disaggregate the data as compared to previous study where it was lumped into just Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. This particular study looked more at the list of Pacific Island and Hawaii. Looked at, of course, graduation outcome, looked at post-secondary outcome. And I'll just say overall, the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander outcome is slightly below average of the general population. It depends on which particular island nation you're looking at, but some are doing worse than others, some are doing better than others. But one of the things that the research really focused on is not just educational outcome, as in graduation rate, post-secondary education, but they also looked at well-being and also health. And that's where the most concerning aspect of the study data, because a lot of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders do not feel like they belong in our public school. There's a large level of depression as compared to the regular population, 2 and 5, 40%. Suicidal ideation is almost 20%. Bullying is reported in 1 in 4, and mental health in general is a high rate of mental health issue among the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, especially among the LGBTQ plus members of the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community. Now, I'll move quickly to the recommendation that was provided. So in general, the recommendation is to basically have more cultural program in public school on Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, showcasing their culture and history and contribution to this country and to the state. And some program already exists throughout the state. So there are organizations in the state that has programs, and they are sometimes visit school. They're mostly all concentrated in King and Pierce and Snohomish County. And of course, I'll just go straight to recommendation. And one of the recommendation I think it's hard to find is to somehow have more NHPI educator in the school system. That's one thing that's lacking right now, and that's going to be similar. A lot of these recommendations I'm finding are similar with the Asian American community. One of the things people don't actually realize is, and I'd like to point this one in particular as number one, is language service. There are many languages in the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, and most of them aren't being served in public school or taught in any way in public school. So that's one aspect that could use improvement. I'm gonna go on to the Asian part. Similar way, the study was done in a similar way, different from last time because the data disaggregation was not something that was pushed before. And now it's the core aspect of this particular study. And going through the result, Asian and Asian American in general are doing better than the general public in terms of educational achievement. This depends on different community, of course. Some communities are doing better than others. And of course, when I'm talking about Asian and Asian American, most of the community are in the 3 counties, King, Snohomish, Pierce. They're also spread out throughout the state. And again, the fastest growing, if you count it as a whole, the fastest growing minority community in Washington state. Around right now would be around 15% of the state population and growing. And you count Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, over 15%. So as I said, the learning outcome is generally looking on the data set, doing pretty well. Depends on which particular community. It also depends on language learning. English as a second language, students tend not to do as well as native language speaker. And post-secondary outcome is also, as a whole, doing well, but different within different ethnic groups. So In general, I'm going to skip down to the policy recommendation, which are very similar to that of the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. The recommendation are similar, which is to include more ethnic curriculum, include more Asian and Asian American teachers, and just gonna cut to the end actually. Yeah, and of course continue to disaggregate data. Um, and I can take any question right now. I think I was planning for 15 minutes and I'm 4 minutes short.
Yeah,
So
no worries. This is
yeah.
great. So, are there schools or districts that are doing this particularly well? Because those
Um,
those are some pretty robust and specific recommendations.
It depends. It depends on the school and school district. I don't know Pacific School District outcome. I will say that there are some school district right now, like the Bellevue School District, and there's a graph on this. Bellevue School District actually has a near majority Asian American population. And they tend to be one of the higher achieving district. Of course, they are well resourced, and they have a lot of educational programs that are geared toward Asian and Asian American, including language program. Now, even with those districts, the number of educator that are Asian American is actually lacking. That's the one area that in general in the state could use improving in terms of recruiting and hiring minority teachers. Yeah, see the data. The Bellevue School District has a near majority population of Asian and Asian American. That doesn't count Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. So another thing that you mentioned in the report is the importance of family and community, especially among the Pacific Islander community. Have there been specific recommendations on how to incorporate the family into serving students?
Pacific, I don't know. I don't think there is any Pacific in the greater report, but I think there might be some ideas that community organization might have. I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, yeah, not a problem. So I'll just open it up too. If folks have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, or feel free to use the chat function. Again, appreciate Nam your
Yes.
report. This is great. And yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Maria.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. All right, do we see a WSU logo and the
Yep.
beginning of a PowerPoint? Great. All right, so again, my name is Maria Sigüenza, Director for the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, and I will be giving a brief overview of the Educational Opportunity Gap Study that we worked with WSU on that was released just this year. Let me get my mouse situated. All right, so I will be giving a very brief overview. Just as a caveat, this presentation was created as a 2-hour long presentation. It was very, very detailed, and I'll be following the same overview, just pared down. I'm more than happy to take questions at the end, with the caveat that I was not part of the research team and I may have to come back to you with some answers. So today's presentation, you can expect an overview on our team, the background of the study, the framework, analysis from the secondary and primary sources, key findings, and potential interventions. Our team was led by the Social and Economic Sciences Research Center at the Washington State University, with Dr. Lena Lee as a principal investigator and project manager, Dr. Ruben Angel Arias Rueda. This was a fantastic team that I hope I get the opportunity to work with again in the future. So let me give you all of the little boxes here. The research team used the foundational 2008 Proyecto Acceso study to roadmap the current study. Their mixed methods approach sussed out key themes in early learning, in K-12 environment, and found that disparities continue to persist despite seeing graduation rates improve, dropout rates decline, and families and students showing strong aspirations and resilience. The team included a set of policy recommendations relating to students, families, the K-12 system that address immediate and long-term system change, stressing that we need measures to monitor progress. The team started their research first by creating a framework with characteristics that affect academic outcomes. They wanted to know how public school system practices, family and community characteristics, school attributes, and resource availability would create opportunity facilitators or barriers. They also wanted to know how student aspirations and attributes affected opportunity facilitators or barriers. And these characteristics, we argue, are cyclical and all affect opportunity and barriers. The team spent the majority of time gathering and analyzing secondary and primary source data to look for indicators of the opportunity gap. They used publicly available data from the Census Bureau, OSPI, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, OFM, the Office of Financial Management, Washington Student Achievement Council, Migration Policy Institute, and the Pew Research Center. And they also used primary data by way of focus groups with parents and guardians and individual interviews with students. And I'll talk about that in the second part of the presentation. So their approach was holistic, looking through early learning data to assess information such as participation and readiness rates, as you can see here. They looked at K-12 data to see enrollment and graduation rates, along with workforce data analysis as it pertains to the adults in the buildings. And they looked at post-secondary data to assess dual credit usage, graduation outcomes, and track factors like affordability, enrollment, student supports, and completion rates. And what did they take from this secondary data? What did they gather? The overrepresentation of Latino and Hispanic students in early learning programs reflect high engagement and the valuing of free programming. While ECAP brings modest gains in literacy and math, these early advantages don't always persist into later grades. Children bring rich cultural strengths and should be bolstered through bilingual and culturally responsive instruction, stronger family engagement, and strong supports through elementary years, like ongoing support for language development for the about 50% long-term multilingual learners. The graduation rate gap has narrowed when compared to non-Hispanic peers, and there's a high participation in the college-bound scholarship program, indicating a clear goal for higher education attainment. But there's still a clear underrepresentation of Hispanic students in gifted programs, and they are less likely to receive needed accommodations. Systemic barriers are also at play, with school mobility, housing instability, and economic hardship affecting learning outcomes. The research team found that while the data sets were diverse in the way they tracked data or presented data, they had gaps and limitations. And to paint detail and to the big picture takeaways that our secondary data provided us, the research team needed micro level data. And they found this micro level data through the primary data source, which I'll talk about, that was collected by way of focus groups with parents and guardians and individual interviews with students. The research team designed questions, they piloted those questions, they recruited participants, they recorded and transcribed the sessions, and they coded the answers. And from this slide, you can see that these interviews, they were able to suss out 7 key themes that were shared by both adults and students. They coded 7 broader axes, which I'll show in the next slide from interviews and the group focus, the focus groups. And so the broader themes that were shared by both parents and students were language at home, the value that it brings and the confidence that it brings to both parents and students. The importance of education overall is shared by both parents and students. The importance of parental involvement. They both underscored challenges in education, and they were a little bit different in terms of parent accessibility by way of interpreter gaps and translations, creating frustration, and challenges in education for students was more so lack of representation and the rigid school systems that they find themselves in. They also sussed out the theme of access to resources. By way of, skepticism of resource distribution or wanting more or electives or more free time. And they also looked at perceived strengths and recommendations for improvement. And one thing that I'll highlight here is that, both really appreciated the bilingual aspect of their schools, positive teachers, etc. It's really important. Now the axial coding summary, the 7 kind of broader themes that were coded with the focus groups and the interviews were language barriers, loss of language and cultural marginalization, discrimination and bias, bullying, very much to CAPAA's studies. We're seeing a really high rate of students being targeted for their language use, their skin color, their identity. School supports, parent engagement, and safety concerns were also coded in broader themes of both interview sets. Now, in future work, our research team expressed that we need to capture voices from parents who aren't already involved. They stressed that we cannot generalize the themes that were found in these last 2 slides because we are missing voices and stories. And they stressed that in the next study, the design needs to capture voices of adults and students who aren't as involved as our interview and focus group participants this time around. So overall, we have an overview of the primary data, an overview of the secondary data, and kind of the key takeaways. But you can see that there has been some progress made since our 2008 study. There has been strong engagement in early programs. Graduation rates have improved and dropout rates have declined. And teacher diversity is slightly improving, but challenges remain. Economic disparities, lower educational attainment, language loss. Early learning gains fade without sustained support, which was a really interesting aspect of the study that was stressed time and time again throughout the primary and secondary findings. And disparities remain in post-secondary readiness, advanced learning access and disability accommodations, and inequities persist in attendance, in kindergarten readiness, and math performance, and access to dual credit and discipline practices. From the perspectives of students and parents, supportive teachers, bilingual staff, and trust-building efforts are highlighted by both parents and students, and all play into strong academic potential and aspirations of our young people. And challenges remain, from personnel to lack of resources and lack of support. So the study was rounded out by a set of seven. Seven seems to be the theme of our study this year. 7 policy recommendations that range from academic equity, which include tutoring, after-school programs, culturally relevant curricula, long-term expansion of dual language and advanced learning pathways, to student supports, to include more counselors, etc., educator workforce, the importance of recruiting and retaining Hispanic and Latina or Spanish-speaking teachers, for example, family engagement to ensure communication, school climate, safety, and cultural identity. And as I mentioned at the beginning, and I think maybe in the middle of the presentation, our researchers really stressed that in order for us to adequately monitor and create accountability measures, we need to have better data. Director Nguyen talked about being able to disaggregate data, and this study being a little bit different from the landmark 2008 study that they had, and underscored that part of the reason was the ability to disaggregate data. That's not true for the Latino community. We know that the Latino community is not a monolith, but it is treated as such in our data sets. And by doing so, we cannot track short-term progress. We cannot track long-term systemic change. And we need to be able to do those two things to ensure that Hispanic and Latino students feel supported, they feel affirmed, and prepared for post-secondary success. That's the end. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, and we do have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to use either the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen or the chat. And I do have a few questions here. Maria, there's a few that I've got for you, and then we'll open it up more broadly.
I'll do my
So,
best.
okay. So Maria, you just referenced this, and this is one of the questions that came up. Are there I guess, energy to focus on disaggregation of Hispanic Latinx
Yes, and
data?
I'm glad that you asked that question. So over the last couple of years, and actually in the last biennia, the commission created a request to then Governor Inslee to increase our footprint, our commission's footprint. And we asked for that for a couple of reasons. The first one is that we argue that the state actually doesn't really know the Latino community. And we can point to the data sets that create us as a monolith. But then additionally, we are an undercounted population. We don't have, we believe, adequate data to understand the experience of the Latino community in Washington state. And so we were funded, we increased our staff size, and they did a community survey throughout 2023 to ask individuals from our community how they identify, what their race is, what their nationality is, etc. And from that, we were able to gather some information that really told us that folks don't identify with the term Hispanic, which is nothing new.
Right.
Nothing new. It's nothing that we didn't already know, but we needed to have the data.
Mm-hmm.
And we're putting it on pause because of the current environment, but we wanted to have a name change so that folks could feel better identified with our commission. And we are working with the Office of Equity to do a little bit of a project statewide in that we need to assess how we're actually collecting data. And part of our recommendation is to include not only the ethnicity label, Hispanic and Latino, we're going to keep that because it ties into, our federal tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever appropriate, add additional layers. So we found that our community most often identifies with their nationality. And so the recommendation would be to either group by South American, Latin American, or Central American and North American with the underscoring of ensuring that we are giving people the option to identify as Indigenous, because that is something that we have effectively erased in our data sets is our indigeneity. And that also plays into disparities. So that was a really long-winded answer.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there is energy and there has been work.
Great, that's fantastic. Okay, I have another question for you, which is similar to the one that I asked Nam. Are there schools or districts that are implementing the policy recommendations, or are there bright spots that we should pay attention to? And Ed, I appreciate you including some bright spots in your presentation, which is why I didn't ask you that question.
No
But yeah,
worries.
wondering if there are also exemplars in the Latino community as well, like districts and schools that are serving them well.
At least for us, we did not have any specific data sets looking at such a granular level. Our research team looked more so at statewide trends. The caveat there is that the focus groups and the interview participants were from Central Washington. And we could see that in Central Washington, where we do have the majority of our Latino population, we did see that schools that had bilingual staff, schools that had engagement efforts to build trust, parents underscored how appreciative they were and how they felt seen, and so did students.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, we have staff in Central Washington as well. And so we will be amplifying some of that work because if it's working, we all need to know about it. Great. So this is a question for all three of you. How has your reports, how have they been received by policymakers and the community?
So we did our study report to the EOGOAC in September, a month ago now. And I think it was really well received. There were conversations within the group that reflect disappointment that over the span of 16 years, while there has been some improvement, it has been marginal, and um, that really stressed the aspect of monitoring and accountability. And I don't know, I'm willing to bet that this is kind of a similar narrative that both CAAA and CAPAA have experienced as they've rolled out their study.
Eric, yeah, I would agree with what Maria said. I think it's been, again, positive. We presented this summer, um, which feels like forever ago now, but it was not that long ago. And I think, again, overwhelmingly positive, with some disappointment that we can't seem to figure out. I'm going to use the word that Representative Santos used so many years ago, and it's still true, the pernicious opportunity gap. Like we need to figure out um, what we can do to reduce and eliminate the opportunity gap.
Yeah, and Nam, did you see the same thing, or have there been other ways that the report's been received?
We're still going through how the report is being received, actually. We're looking through the recommendation, and actually we were waiting for, we were the first one to present among the three ethnic commission. And the plan was afterward for the EGOAC to basically go through what the recommendation and policy are. In terms of our different community, yeah, we have different needs a lot, especially within our disaggregate data. But the overall, what we're looking to improve is clear in terms of mental health and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, yeah, that's a theme that we've heard across the state too. Has your data and your reports influenced how the EOGAC is going to be working moving forward?
They just completed their yeah, we just completed our reporting. So I think that last meeting was the last presentation. So they are moving forward with what they've seen, and that will be discussed later because this is all relatively pretty new.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
fairly new. What I will say about the EOGOAC is that they are very data driven, and they have always leaned on us as advisors and have worked towards ensuring that the work that we do and the communities that we represent and the voices that we uplift are embedded into their work plans on a yearly basis. And they have done a fantastic job since their inception.
Great. Yeah, and Ed, I saw that you unmuted for a minute there. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I mean, Maria said everything I was going to say, but I again, I just appreciate the partnership that the commissions have had with the EOJAC since its start. Um, Always, what do you need? Just always, I feel like it's a bunch of supportive aunties and uncles.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, I have one last question for all three of you, which is for those of us who are watching right now, either live or will be watching the recording later of this, how can we, as community members, as advocates, as parents, as students, engage with this important research that you've just done? What are next steps? What should we do with it?
Talk to your legislators. Talk to OSPI. Talk to your local districts. I think having those conversations and saying, "Hey, I have this data. I have this that shows that we have these gaps. What can we do about it?" Obviously, anyone that's watching this cares about education. Um, what can we do to reduce these opportunity gaps? Like real things, not just, lip service things, but what real things can we put into place to reduce opportunity gaps?
I agree. I would also share that, this is, like Nam said, this is a fairly new study. We have been waiting to have this presentation in September with the EOGOAC and talk through the nitty-gritty details of the recommendations and the outcomes of the study. And we're moving forward with a plan. We still have not engaged with other associations outside of the state system with OSPI and our legislators. So there's still work to be done, and share the information, I would say. And if you see us, if you see that we should be somewhere where we haven't been yet, and sharing the good word of this study, let us know. The easiest way to reach Hispanic Affairs is through our general inbox. It's hispanic@cha.wa.gov. And my direct email is director@cha.wa.gov. It's pretty easy to remember.
And I don't have much to add. The only thing is that there was a lot of focus on mental health, and I think that's maybe one of our approach in the near future we haven't really discussed yet. I think that's one issue that's been going around pervasive, and not just education, but all around. But I think especially in terms of our youth and education, the thing that we are thinking about looking at in the near future is the mental health of our community, especially our young ones.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And Nam, I absolutely agree. We at League of Education Voters are leaning into mental health supports across Washington State because of the reasons that you shared. Really appreciate you all being here, Maria, Ed, and Nam, and thanks to all of you for participating and submitting questions. I will include links to the Ethnic Commission's website in the follow-up email, which you should receive in about 24 hours. Our next webinar will take place on Wednesday, October 22nd. We'll spotlight effective practices from Washington high schools that are leading the way in helping students complete financial aid applications. In alignment with Governor Ferguson's Washington Completes FAFSA executive order, this event will feature high schools sharing innovative, equity-driven strategies to boost FAFSA and WASFA completion, student voices from across the state offering feedback on what works and what doesn't, and remarks from Governor Ferguson on the importance of financial aid access and his vision for the statewide campaign. Whether you're a school leader, counselor, educator, or community partner, or student, this webinar will provide actionable insights and inspiration to help more students access the financial aid they deserve. Registration information is on our website, educationvoters.org. Just go to events, then lunchtime webinars. Spanish interpretation and English closed captioning will be available. Also, if you're in the greater Spokane area, please register for this year's Youth Advocacy Summit on Saturday, November 1st at Gonzaga University. Registration info is on our website, educationvoters.org. Just go to events. Special thanks to College Spark Washington, True Measure Collaborative, and Microsoft for making this annual event possible. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to me at Arik, A-R-I-K, at educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website and will be sent to you in the follow-up email to today's webinar, which you should receive in about 24 hours. Please share this recording with your friends and colleagues. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website, educationvoters.org. Thank you again for attending. Each one of us has the right to feel safe and valued. Together, we will fight for a world in which true economic and educational equity exists. We look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Maria, Nam, and Ed, thank you again for all you do for Washington's students, families, and students, educators, everyone in the system. Thank you for all your work on the reports, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Eric.